Welcome to the Gravel Eyes podcast, everybody. I'm your host, John Vargas, and today we have a special guest, Scott Ross, who is a retired captain for LA County Fire Department, just recently retired. He's also on the board for the PSPSA conference, the Peer Support Group conference that happens every year in San Diego. He, what else does he do? He has his own business he started about peer support coordination for other departments. He also has his hand in a lot of stuff. I know a lot of people who have known him for a very long time. He's got over 25 years in just being a peer supporter. Amazing guy. Other than that, everything we say and do in this podcast does not reflect the views and the opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. Got to say that. And on top of that, I would like for everyone to like and subscribe to this podcast because it helps the algorithm for someone who needs to hear this episode or many other episodes. So it helps our movement and our support towards helping first responders who are struggling with mental health, who are dealing with issues involving trauma, on-the-job injuries, and furthermore. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. And take care. I love you.
It's time for Grab Lives.
Scott Ross. Thank you, brother, for being here. I've just had Jason Cash on the podcast.
Yeah.
And he considers you a mentor, friend, amongst many other people who I've come in contact with. Maddie Fiorenza, he's been on a couple times.
Yeah.
And, I just really wanted to have you on. And of course, we realized there was a common thread between us. I worked with your son back in the day.
Oh yeah.
He's also an LA County firefighter, and there's nothing happens by accident. I think everything happens on purpose.
True.
So
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I just saw him this morning getting off work and
okay.
4 days or something, and I just remember those days coming off being exhausted. Like it's a rest day. Right.
Right.
He's in recovery mode today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's really what I've seen myself too. It's like most of my time off is rest and recovery.
Yeah.
And I treat rest as a weapon as opposed to what it used to be like. I used to just drive in this sympathetic state and overtrain my body until I would hit injuries and, pain. And apparently that's a sign or a clue to look into that there's something going on. There's not something out of balance,
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, we talked a little bit about that. Is that your body keeps a score, right? There's books written on that, and just like anything, vehicle, you do all the maintenance and stuff like that, but that check engine light's going to come on at some point.
What do you think about that book?
I actually have not read it myself.
Okay.
Again, one of those things for me is my time is limited. I've been so busy through my career that sitting down and reading has not been, leisure activity, I guess.
Yeah.
Limited.
I mean, it's a pretty long book.
Yeah.
I think the audiobook is pretty efficient. If you're driving, place to place and you get to kind of get maybe a chapter in or so. But, I found it to be pretty profound in the sense that this doctor has been studying this for a long time, and he's putting these pieces together and studying. I think one of the examples was a veteran, right? And he was trying to figure out like, hey, how did this guy end up like this,
Right.
like in this really dark state with himself, and he couldn't be around his family, couldn't be around his kids.
Yeah.
And there was like this psychoanalysis he had to do on this person. And he was realizing there's something deeper to this. There's some trauma held in the body. And how do we discover that? And each person's different. They have a different blueprint.
True.
And so I think with that understanding, it's really complex the way a patient is seen, especially someone who sees trauma all the time on a daily basis, right? Is in that state. Yeah. So it was a really, really good book. I definitely highly recommend it to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that we're the very last, right? We take care of everybody else. And, who do we not take care of? We come secondary, at the last of the list, on taking care of ourselves. I'm a perfect example of that. You know what I mean? I do a lot of instructing. I teach for the IAFF, a master instructor with their IAFF Peer Support training. And I actually had to turn it over to, other instructors. We always have two instructors when we're teaching the class. And so it's really hard for me to teach this self-care portion because I'm not really good at it, Yeah. So you just let those, go by those who do it better than I do.
So there's a lot in that you have a kind of had under your belt per se over the years. I mean, you're a captain for LA County Fire Department. How long were you captain for?
18 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know you were like involved with IAFF.
Yeah.
But I know you did a lot of peer support group stuff. I mean, you did one of the presidents or vice president of the PSPSA program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The PSA conference down in San Diego every year. I'm on the board, vice president for PSPSA. Gotten into a lot of little, other things as well as the job.
Yeah.
So.
And then you have a new business.
Yeah.
What is this business?
Yeah. So it's Ross Peer Consulting. I put so many years. It's 32 years on the job. I started off with Inglewood Fire. So I kind of understood that smaller department mentality, and then fell in the big pond with LA County and did 32 years, in the fire service. I got involved with peer support about 25 years ago. Came after kind of my own, family. We had a tragedy within our family. My oldest son lost his girlfriend and her best friend in a boating accident out, in Parker. And there was something that I learned there because, like I said, I had come from a smaller department and I knew everybody, but I had, we had just come over to the county and now I don't know a whole lot of people, but I'm still in the fire service and that culture that, we take care of each other. I really, really saw the depth of that. Firefighters that I didn't know working for the job that came out to the river to help us search because we were out there for a week. The girls were missing. Obviously became a recovery mission. But the amount of folks that came out, there was an email that was put out within our department that Scott's out at the river, the girls are missing. I'll never forget this one guy, Mike. I never met him. He worked for LA County. He was from the northern part of county. Apparently saw the email and he put his own family vacation on hold. He was leaving like the next day, put his family vacation on hold, brought his Sea-Doos out to the river to, come help us search. And after a couple of days, he went and caught up with his family and left me his equipment, the Sea-Doos and all that, and just said, just get him back to me whenever. And it's that kind of thing that really showed me the depths of what we talk about when we talk about the brotherhood and sisterhood in the fire service and that we take care of our own. And I've seen it over the years, the things that we do. It's in tragedy and things that happen. I've seen us all come together and kind of like that show, remember Extreme Home Makeover?
Yeah.
It's kind of like us, right? I mean, they just show up and some of the most amazing things have been done. I have seen guys work tirelessly to take care of families, in the fire families. It's amazing, So I learned that a long time ago. And then back when we started doing peer support, that was not the cool thing, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of stigma and all what have you. So, I've had a lot of years in the peer support. Done a lot of stuff with the IAFF. So many responses. I kind of, if you will, became like the West Coast guy that on deployments. The IAFF would send me all over, whether it be line of duty deaths, wildland, incidents, shootings. I can't tell you how many multi-casualty shootings I've been to, up in Oregon, Las Vegas, the Walmart shooting down in Texas, or suicides, right? And we've had a lot within our own department
Same.
over the years. But I would get called by the IAFF to go help other agencies that, were so impacted. They might have had a peer support team, but their department was so impacted that they were asking for help, which was great. And then, of course, I found it very unique. One time I got called out of state for a department that had a suicide inside a fire station, which changes things, right?
For sure.
That's ultimately they weren't gonna bulldoze the station down, but that changes that station forever.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
It will always be that thing. I found that very unique. We actually had a firefighter suicide in a fire station until we had our Sierra incident within the county. Which I don't know if you remember that, but it's just, to have a firefighter shoot another firefighter, kill that firefighter, shoot another firefighter, then go off, burn his house down, and then complete suicide.
Right.
Hugely significant incident, right? Changes a lot of things forever. And so I've been around a few places, and seen these things. So I just felt like, with 25 years under my belt doing peer support, it was my next thing. And so I started my own company with Ross Peer Consulting, and it's really just to kind of focus teams on where they're at, where they're headed, because the other part of that, when I do the instructing for the IAFF, we go out and do the entry-level peer support training, right? I have seen it time and time again that, there's some very well-established teams out there that do really well. But a lot of the times they put peer, folks through peer training, and then that's it. There's no more, it's like, we need some peers on our team. Okay, well, where's the structure? How do you organize your team? How do you build your team? How do you keep them engaged, right? So that's kind of my focal point for my company, is that, I can come out, assess the team, see where you're at, how is it going, where's the growth, how do you continue, right? How do you keep teams engaged, right? So you're not, and I've seen it time and time again that there'll be a few that are very engaged, and they might, depending on the size of the department, how big their peer team is, but there's always the certain few that are always the active, and then they get overwhelmed. It's just like, how much can you take in? LA County Fire's peer support team, when I first got on, we had about 35 peers, and now we have like 240. But it's, again, relevant to size. We're a large agency. Kind of the rule of thumb that we put out there is, when I, especially when I'm doing training, is that, what's the size of your department? And rule of thumb has always been 10%. If you got a 100-member department, you should have at minimum 10 peers, so you're not burning them out, and then share the wealth, right? Keep them all experienced and growing. So, but it's been quite a ride to see all this stuff. And again, we talk about going back 25 years, to where it was that suck it up mentality to where it is now. We've come so far, and there's so many teams across the country that have done so well. San Diego is an absolutely incredible peer support team. They've done so much down there, and we all learn from each other. There's a big positive in the networking, to keep, peer coordinators and peer teams all engaged, because when I go back to the Sierra incident, could we have handled that? Maybe. But we also learned years back, when we had a much smaller team and we lost two of our firefighters, and Ted and Arnie, we burn our our peer team out big time. And so now, like going back to the Sierra incident, through that networking and trust of all the, agencies around us and the peer teams, we had like 40 peers over, a 4-day period. Or I'm sorry, 80 peers from 12 different agencies over a 4-day period.
Do you mind breaking down the Sierra incident? I don't think everyone's heard the significant story. I know for sure the different parts of the story and so forth. And I remember being on the news and watching it. But
right.
If you don't mind talking about exactly what happened there.
Yeah, so it was on the news. It's a public, known thing. It was that the firefighter, came back into the station and shot his opposite and engineer Tori Carlin and shot the captain in the station. He left that station. There's a real uneasy time immediately following that because things were in motion. We were getting the alerts. Everyone was, responding to the incident, and it's an unknown because we don't know where he's at. We don't know where the shooter is. And the unfortunate thing is this is one of our own. This is another firefighter within our own department that has taken these actions, and it's an unknown, right? I mean, there was station lockdowns. We didn't know if he was coming to other stations. There was a lot of volatility right out of the gate from what was going on. And then a structure fire broke out in the district and happened to be at his house. And so he, of course they couldn't approach, and this is a firefighter starting a fire. There was didn't start small, it took off. And now we have a fully involved house fire. We still don't know because the sheriffs are doing their best to try to figure out, and maintain the safety before, we can't go in. But there's something really significant in that you put firefighters at bay. This whole incident is happening. Everyone's getting awareness of what's happened. There's been a station shooting, and now they're responding to a house fire, which potentially the shooter is at. And then it was confirmed. But yet we don't know, right? So now you've got, when we talk about what firefighters do, that's their job. I mean, if you're going to have them roll up to a scene, you go, well, can't go in. You have to sit here and watch this house burn. That right there is a significant piece, right? That put a lot of people on edge because they want to get stuff. They want to get to work, right? But the scene wasn't safe until they, had confirmed that, okay, he's not a threat. He shot himself at the backside of the house, and so then they can go to work, and the threat was alleviated at that point. But still a very, very significant day. One of the most tragic days in our department's history, and it all came from within. It's a very, very unfortunate situation that whatever was going on led to that. And that tragedy is significant for a lot of people involved. Those that responded to the station, those that responded to the incident, had some seriously long-lasting effects. So there was a very, very involved peer support response to that over, a few weeks to make sure that we had covered as much as we could. And then I have a friend on the job, Captain Ed Monroe, who talks about it. And I've done speaking engagements with him. And, we've done presentations on the Sierra incident. And it's kind of twofold, right? The Sierra incident, the response, what happened, the peer support response, how we did that. And also the secondary part of that is that Captain Monroe talks about his journey because he was responding to that incident. And he was in that unknown portion that, you know, the incident was happening, but they didn't know where the shooter was. And he talks about it in his presentation. And then also the fact that he lives out of state. So he was around for a couple days and then went home, and he slipped through the cracks. He went home, was on his own, didn't get engaged with the peer support response. And, you know, it's one of those things that I still to this day, you know, am regretful that we missed somebody, because he had significant, you know, trauma from being there and dealing with all that. He's doing much better now. But it was extremely impactful for him. So that's where, you know, we talk about trying to leave no stone unturned, making sure that everyone is taken care of, cover all bases, you know, so things like that don't happen. Was pretty significant for him. So,
yeah, I think, you know, coming from personal experience, I know that the aftermath is really where things start revealing itself.
right.
And not just like a week or so, maybe like even a year to something that happens. You know, it's just thoughts can sink through, and a lot of times we don't understand how our mind is working, and really understanding, like, sometimes the trauma is just kind of itching at you to integrate what happened, or to at least understand, have some understanding underneath it all.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, in order for us to move forward, we have to have that understanding that's supporting us around each like sliver and crack and cranny of an incident or a call or a friend you might have, you know, who went through something. And we're all connected, especially in an agency. So it's really fascinating to kind of figure out, because we're just barely figuring out how we can transcend all this in a way. You know, we're doing our best. And then on top of that, I feel like, you know, like there's just that we're fighting against an old paradigm of change to allow peer support to use its full effect. And this happened recently for me when I was at my fire station. You know, being at the kitchen table, we talk and we discuss, like, you know, what's coming up this next month. There's certain trainings, and you know, I've been a steward for the union for my station. And so I mentioned, hey guys, we have peer support group training that's coming up in April. And we had an overtime captain sitting there at the table, and he interrupted me and said he was really bad-mouthing peer support.
Yeah.
And he had mentioned also, he's like, if you guys want to talk about something, don't ever come to me at the front office. I'll just tell you to grow a pair. And so when he told me that, or when he said that at the kitchen table, as a leader,
Right.
I felt super disrespected, and I just had a hard time with that. I sat with that for quite some time. And my biggest thing is trying to see the bigger picture in things, you know, and zooming out.
Right.
And I'm just seeing that, you know, we're fighting against an old paradigm of that. That's a clear example.
Right.
And, you know, I always cue in to things that disturb my consciousness.
Yeah.
That's a clue for me. Hey, why is that disturbing to me? You know, and I
Right.
ultimately, if someone says something and it hits me to the core of something within me, you know, it's bothering me somehow. So I got to look into that. And so, yeah, I found that to be disturbing. And I think mainly because I've been through my own sense of suffering, and I've turned it around to help other people's sense of suffering, especially in our line of work. And for someone to kind of, you know, try to make that not happen, it really affected me, you know? So, but that's what I'm seeing. I think, especially with our department, I think we're having a harder time shifting with some of the old generations and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really hard, man. I'm having a hard time moving past the barriers and even the red tape. You know, there's a lot of red tape within each agency individually, and especially bigger departments. Money's involved, politics is involved, and we lose a piece of that part, that support from these other sections, like the political and the money side, to get the support we need to build peer support group and other peers who can really step into that role, you know?
Right. Well, I will tell you two things. One, you struck a nerve when you said red tape. That's, I will tell you that will always and forever be one of those things that I have struggled with for so long. Look, it is what it is. It's a government agency. We know there's bureaucratic red tape. We understand, especially your department, my department, nothing happens quick, right? Everything, it takes forever. But first, before I get into that, because I've got a few things to say about that. But, that captain, right, that threw that out there, I'm conflicted with that in the fact that he's old guard. I grew up with that in the fire service. And that's the way it used to be.
Yeah.
It just, hey, I don't want to hear your problems. Get on the truck, right? Go handle the business. Very seldom would you find someone that you could connect with, early on in the career. Whether that be, and I will tell you who it was for me, is that I had a paramedic partner. I was on the rescue for, about 8 years or so. And those conversations as a squatty, that was our mental health, riding back from the hospitals and stuff like that, or what we call now headset therapy, right?
Yeah.
We do that, but you will find people within the fire service that you connect with and you actually can really, really talk, I mean, look, there's all the masculinity and the macho, but we're all human, when it comes down to it, there's things on this job that will affect you, I mean, I still have things in my head, I can tell you exactly about the 4-year-old girl that I went on that was, got shot in the head by her dad. It was accidental, an accidental gun injury. He was losing it, right? But every single piece of that picture is so ingrained in my memory, right? From I can tell you exactly what position our rescue was in, the time of day. I can clearly see everything that she was wearing. It's just as clear as you and I are looking at each other in my head, right? There is those things that are going to impact you. I don't care, how tough, how, think you can move past all this stuff. There will be things in your career that will affect you and will sit with you. It's how do we process and put it in the right perspective, right? And move forward. And again, it was about a time when my daughter was around the same age. So, it's probably one of those things that connect, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It happens to all of us. You don't get out of this job unscathed. There's, that carousel of images and memories and things that we see, sight, smell, all those things are all there, right? We can all go back to them. So I'm, as much as when you say about this captain saying that, I know he's hurting too.
Right.
It's
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. He just hasn't found that person, hasn't found that way to open up. It will come at some point. He will need that need to connect. It's just the way it is, right? So, but it is a hindrance, and I'm glad you took that perspective when you heard that like, well, that's maybe not the right thing, right? Because we were vulnerable and naive early in our careers that's the way we were built, stuff it down, move on. That's how you're going to get through this job. I had heard that so many times in my career. It's like, okay, but then moving forward, right, we've moved to the stigma. It's obviously and clearly has declined. We've broken down those barriers. And I think through, the really good clinicians out there in the world, the culturally competent clinicians, the peer support, the people that are engaged, we've done such a good job of breaking down that stigma and saying it's okay to not be okay, right? That's been helpful. I have seen it only because I've lived it for as long as I have, that you will be affected and it's okay to take care of yourself. Like actually ask for help or reach out or talk to somebody, just that vent, right? I can't tell you how many times, and I'm talking thousands and thousands of contacts for me over my years, that at times people I have talked to, and it's all part of that active listening type stuff, right? If you were really, truly, and I truly believe this when I say this, it's a compassionate presence, right? You can be there for someone and truly be engaged with them and hear them. There isn't a whole lot that you have to say, it's just being there. And I've had guys that so many times, guys, gals, whatever, that when we're done talking, they're like, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. You really helped me out. And myself, I didn't do anything. I was just here with you. Right. And they are sorting through stuff, right? Because it's not really our job to give advice. That's what we are in the culture, right? We're the fixers, right? We fix, and that's what you have to, it's a kind of a shift, if you will, from being in a firefighter role or a first responder role of, well, what's going on? Which problem? Let me fix, and giving advice. That's not it. It's really just being there, right? Because we don't need to be fixing their problems. That's not what they need. They need us to be there and hear them, right? Now we can certainly, resource, and if it's something more than at our level of training that they need, clinical therapy or, need to talk to a professional, absolutely, But then it's also my job as a peer, and I've taken this very seriously, is that you got to talk to the right people.
Right. It's huge.
There's clinicians out there that I wouldn't send my worst enemy to. They're just out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And whether it's, I don't know. I don't even want to go dive deep on that, because enough said, right? It's a cultural competency thing. Understand us, understand our job, understand that armor we wear, and to what we were talking about before is that we're the worst at actually getting to that point to where we actually are okay with saying, I might need a little something.
Yeah.
It has astonished me and bewildered me for as long as I've been doing this, because I have seen people in the most critical phases of their life tell me they're good. It's like, I'm not going to argue with you. In my head, I'm saying, you're so far from good, but that's where we stand, right?
Yeah.
We're going to stand on that hill. And you kind of mentioned before we got started about that stubbornness.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, if we aren't all a bunch of mules, that will not go to water, we're a difficult bunch to reach when it comes to that, right? So how do we change that? How do we get our folks? Because I want people to truly be okay when they're done, when they, hit the finish line. I mean, I kind of feel like there's an accomplishment here. I actually retired, right? And I mean, some will say that I'm not right, but I'm pretty good. I actually had my little exit thing with the clinical, and they were like, well, you have PTSD. I'm like, no way, really? Like, shocker, right? Do I need a clinician to tell me that I'm not right in the head? No, not really. I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there that, has been trauma, right? It's really interesting because, I have a very good friend, Dr. Steve Froelich. He's our lead clinician for LA County Fire. And I do a lot of presentations with him. We do cultural competency classes. We talk to colleges, for, clinicians that want to do this kind of work. And we talk about there was a study in regards to what your average citizens will see in a lifetime, a trauma, you know, a really bad incident or have traumas happen within their life at a high level, like critical, right? Average is like 3 to 4, which is kind of surprising to me, right? Like, because we see it every day, right? So when you think about what we do as opposed to what the average citizen sees in trauma, really gnarly trauma, stuff that affects us, right? Their average is 3 to 4 in a lifetime. It's just, it still just kind of is an amazing fact for me, because depending on where you work, what house you work in, that you might hit those marks by noon, right?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've all had those, right?
Yeah.
We had those days where like go from one really bad incident to another really bad incident right away. But that could all be in a day.
Right.
And then you put 30, 35 years, whatever your career, you know, I mean, even those folks that are, you know, 5, 10 years on the job have already way surpassed what your average citizen is seeing. So, and we're always, you know, I could ask you right now and you know exactly what the answer is. How you doing? I'm good, right? We're always good until we're not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I like to go back to, you know, you're talking about cultural competency and the cultural pattern I'm seeing with that stubbornness. You know, it is really, every single person carries it, and it's a really interesting integrated pattern we all carry, you know, and I've dove into it within myself, and the way when I help other people to get around it, it's not as difficult as it may seem. The way I've seen it is it's a protection mechanism, and it's built and designed through a state of survival to where you unconsciously put up a wall or a barrier for yourself. And I really look into what we unconsciously create for ourselves, because of that stubbornness now, we want some type of challenge in order to grow, or some type of catastrophe in order to grow. So we unconsciously will create injuries and illnesses in ourselves it's almost manifesting something in order for us to look inward so those barriers can come down. Right. And so what I've realized is, like, guys are coming to me with all these injuries, they're not listening, still stubborn, to where they're down to the point where they're all the way at a low level to where they're reaching suicide ideation.
Right.
And now it's taking a long time to pull someone out of that hole because of their stubbornness.
Right.
So that's one of the first things I look into is someone's stubbornness. And it's really interesting when you ask someone, why are you stubborn? And I always tell people, just think of the first thing that comes up into your mind or your thoughts, go to that, because that's exactly what you need to enter. It's a cue for you to see, okay, I see this came from, like, sometimes you get a memory when you were a child, the way your dad talked to you or the way your mom talked to you. You know, so it's really fascinating. But I think the stubbornness too, it comes from a lot of being a rookie and the way you're treated. And so you're building up these walls over and over and over, and it becomes calloused, man. It's really interesting. So within our line of work, you know, I really want people to understand, just pay attention to your stubbornness. Look at it and see it for what it's worth. And you'll be more fascinated now that you have heard this and you start practicing that. You'll be really interested to see what comes up in your life. Like, wow, I'm stubborn with this, or wow, I'm stubborn with that.
Right. Well, the stubbornness, I agree. I mean, it's really interesting that, I think we're born in this when we start the academy.
Yeah.
Right. Because where does it start? And it could very well be way before that.
Right.
Right. However you were brought up, all these things. But, when I think about going back to the academy, and then of course my son's on the job. And so I got to kind of through him relive the academy, because I heard all the struggles, going through the academy, all these things, right? It's tough. It's, we break them down. Well, it has to be, for one, right? Because you can't soften an academy.
Right.
You're doing a disservice, because as we all know, right?
Mhm.
You have to be able to act, and you rely on your training. As you know, I've seen it through departments all over the country. You know, they always have that, you know, train like your life depended on it, right? Because it does. There
Mhm.
is not a more clearer statement to that to be true. In the academy, we have to kind of find if someone has it within them to be able to handle stress, right? So you put a lot of stress on them in the academies,
Mhm.
because if they can't handle it, they're not going to be okay in the field, you know. And we want them to be okay, but it starts there, right? And then going through your rookie years and all that stuff, and then suck it up. And the captain, like you spoke of, is like, you know, just get over it, or, you know, grow a pair, whatever. We put this armor, and it is the self mechanism, or defense mechanism, like you speak of, because, well, think about what the job is. What do we do, right? We're sitting in the stations, and the alarm goes off, and we have to react, and we have to go perform,
Mhm.
and we have to fix that person's worst day, whatever it is, or their problems that they're facing, because there's no 911 plus, right? We can't just show up and go, oh, this is on you. I don't know how to fix this, right? We go to great lengths, and I have seen it over my career, and I'm sure you have. We have gone to great lengths to rectify the problems that person is having in the day. But over and over and over and over and over, we become accustomed to, there is no way to accept anything other than be able to fix the problem, fix it. So if we are fixing all the time, and we internally have something going on, well, that can't be, because I know how to fix it. Well, we've got really good coping mechanisms like drinking and all that other stuff, right? We know how to fix all of our problems. I'm being facetious. That's not the way we do it, right? There's good coping skills and there's bad coping skills. But, you know, as I like to say, we're just big dumb animals, right? We don't have all the answers, but we'll figure it out. Ask us. We'll figure it out how to get it done, right? And do we do the best in taking care of ourselves? We put Band-Aids on things. We do things like self-medicate, you know, drink, whatever, to kind of get past those issues that might be rearing up, because heaven forbid we have a problem. That's not okay. We're the fixers. We're supposed to fix everything, and this is, you know, now this is a problem. You know, when it starts manifesting itself, and we start to see that, you know, whether sleep deprivation, you know, family issues. I mean, there's an awareness, right, to ourselves. Like you spoke of, it's like if we can start recognizing within ourselves what our triggers are, what are our points, and be mindful to those, right? I think we're going to do a lot better to serve ourselves in our lives and our mental health, because I can tell you, and I kind of pull this example out now and then, but I remember it was kind of almost towards back at the end of the COVID kind of stuff, where everyone in the world was just stressed, right? And I was in a grocery store, and this guy was just giving this young girl at the checkout counter a whole lot of grief over, I don't know what, coupons, different stuff. And he was really being really rough, right? And he was holding the line up, and I had somewhere to go. And I could feel myself elevating, right? To where it was like, this guy is, I'm almost done. You know, I could feel myself building to like, I'm becoming so intolerant. And he's being, you know, really mean, right? There's two things to that. One, I got to go. He's holding things up. Now you're being an ass to this young lady, right? To where I kind of felt like my best thing is I need to get out of the public. I need to go home. You know, I could feel myself elevating. And, you know, luckily I didn't engage with the guy, because it probably wouldn't have gone well for anybody involved. But that was a self-awareness. Like, this is setting me off. I am getting to that point where I'm going to completely lose it and snap on this guy, and that's not going to go anywhere, right? so it's a self-awareness, right? Know when your triggers start hitting, know when it is time to make that phone call. When can you reach out to a buddy? When can you talk to a peer? When is it time to talk to a clinician? All those things are really, that self-awareness stuff. But we still fail miserably at that, right? Because, our numbers are still so high in the fire service, the first responder world, whether it's police, fire, military, with suicides.
Yeah.
And we got to do better, right? And it's an education thing. Continually educate. And we talked a little bit about these fires in LA. And like I said, I've been around this job for a long time. I've had my turn in the weeds. Malibu fires. I think, I talk about my career as a whole. There's probably been 3 times that I actually felt like today's the day. One of those times came out in the wildland fire out in Malibu, where we were in a really bad spot, and it didn't look like we were going to do well. Like, this might be it, This fire in LA that we had, Palisades and the Eaton fire, was at another level, right? And you told me you were out there, so it was extended. There was all kinds of complications and all that stuff. And again, I would say probably some moral injuries because, again, I wasn't there. But being the newly retired guy, it's kind of funny on this side, is because I was like stuck to the TV watching what everyone was doing out there, and then became the Monday morning quarterback guy. Like, oh, you're doing it all wrong, right? It's like, I know, it was really interesting for me, but I saw it, right? I saw the things that the guys were going through, and it really stuck with me. Like, hey, this is pretty significant. There's going to be some serious fallout from this, and there's a couple things that we're really concerned about.
Yeah,
right. Is that one? The fires were tough, and we were hampered by a lot of things out there, right? Water pressure, this staff, equipment. I mean, I think it was the Woolsey fire. I was out with a deputy chief, and I was, long story short of that, is I somehow ended up being his driver. I don't know how that happened. A kid friend of mine, but I was in a chief's wagon driving around, and I told him after the fires were over, I said, I will never ever do that again. You have nothing. You have no water. You have no equipment. I mean, I don't know how you guys do this. This is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Because we were hampered. We had nothing, right? And we're watching things burn, and people, I mean, we were driving through things we should never have been, because we were trying to go find people that were, reports of people trapped in a house and stuff like that, and putting ourselves in danger to get to where they were. What I saw with these fires is that staffing, equipment, all these things, lack of resources, and then the exposure is another big thing. I watched that over those days of all the guys out there with houses upon houses upon houses burning, and we're in wildland gear. Those are still the same things that we suit up with BAs for, that they're breathing in.
Exactly.
I absolutely 100% urge everybody to make sure, and the IAFF's doing a really good job, CPF is doing a good job of making sure that we do as much as we can to get a baseline on this for exposures, but across the board, everybody needs to have that baseline done, and exposure reporting and all that stuff for the long haul, So,
can you explain what a moral injury is? So you mentioned that sometimes, like, you can say something, but people don't have no idea, Scott.
Right.
Like,
yeah. No, I get that, and I'll dive into that a little bit. So, our job, like I said, is to be able to go and solve the issue, right? Put the fire out and do all that. But when we are handcuffed with equipment issues, watching people's personal effects, their homes, their livelihood, their memories, and all that stuff burn, and we can't do anything. That hits us. That hits home for us. Like, we failed. We didn't fail. We were put up against unsurmountable odds.
Right.
You can't, I mean, there's just forces of nature that at times is going to be like bigger than we are. I have walked alongside, I have worked alongside fellow firefighters that have done things that is like, we're not going to win here. We're just not. But that's the mentality, right? We don't want anyone's property to be lost and their entire livelihoods and their memories, their homes and all that stuff to go away, right? And so when it comes to that, there's where Elijah moral injury is like, we didn't do enough, right? We couldn't, right? We still struggle with that. We walk away at times and feeling like, hey, I don't have water. I don't have the equipment. Then there's guys that I know that were in the stations that couldn't go anywhere because we had no equipment. There was no reserve rigs. And it's not like they're complaining about being at the station and stuck at the station. It's they have no equipment to go do anything with. Right? I mean, you just sit in the station. Like, I've talked to a good handful of folks that was like, to sit in the fire stations with no equipment in the station because that rig is out on the fires, and we're, they were holding them at stations, and we're just sitting here going, nothing we can do. Again, like I talked about the Sierra incident, holding firefighters at bay when there's a big incident. We've spoken of this before we got started. It's like, we all want to be on that, right? Everyone wants to go to the big fire and be a part of that, right? And help. I mean, that's what we train for. That's what we live for. But when you get held and you can't, that's difficult.
Yeah, moral injuries are pretty interesting. And I think what moral injuries can do is that they hit a chord against your values. And so values are really fascinating as well, because we create laws around our values, and there are our own personal laws around them. And we support whatever value it is on, like, let's say courage, right? We have this courage and we've created a value around it. Now, if you're unable to act or perceive or enable that courage to go to work, or now that person feels guilt or shame because of that. And it can go deeper to the point where your values are supported by an identity around something. And identities are really interesting, because if we identify with something, then now, it could be a part of something false, not even true. And if you don't know, if you identify with something, start with what you're defensive about, and start there. If you're defensive about something, you're protecting an identity. So for many people, I think when we're talking about this, I think a lot of people just don't have the guidance of even have the self-awareness around a subject. But if you can trace it back to something at the core of your essence of who you are, you can have that bigger perspective on things. You're reacting this way because of this. You're responding this way because of that. And so now that moral injury becomes less and less of a wound, and because the perspective has been guided for you to understand the whole of it. And I think with us going into this career, we're just kind of jumping into it without understanding how our consciousness is behaving, how our subconscious is behaving, because now you add 20 years now, and you have all these calls on your plate of dealing with trauma, but you have no idea how to integrate it. You have no idea why it's sitting in the back of your mind, why you have nightmares, why you have chronic pain, why you have these behaviors towards your kids. Right. So it's I think with The Body Keeps the Score, going back to that book, it plays a big role in understanding how the trauma is stored, how the memories are stored, how we're perceiving our reality in a certain way. Because one person could have a traumatic incident, and two people can have that same call and it could affect one person different because one person has a 4-year-old at home just like yourself.
Yeah.
Because they have a direct response and a connection to that call. And so
100%.
I think that perception for each other to realize, hey, I have to be more open with the ability to see something that could affect someone differently,
Right.
you know, and have that compassion in that way. And the callousness we have, man, it really, I mean, I carry it in so many different ways,
Right.
you know, but I've worked on myself to know where those callous points are. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I tell you, it's something that I put a big emphasis when I'm instructing entry-level peers, right? Is that, and I built it around part of my career, is that as a captain, right? Look, we all come into the station and we go right to work. Start checking out our rigs in the morning. We do all that. We have lineup. We, fix all the world's problems by 9 o'clock, right? We go through the administrative part of the day, what the day looks like, all that other stuff. But another piece to that puzzle for me is I want to know, especially as a captain, I want to know how you're doing. Mm-hmm. Like, how was yesterday? What's going on? How's the family? Those are all real key important factors as a supervisor out in the field, right? And leading my folks, because we don't know when that alarm's going to go off and we don't know what the next call is going to be. We could be that, we all know what that, end result can be.
Well, that's true leadership, Scott.
Right. Well, it's a thing of really, truly understanding, because here's the thing that you just can't know. Mm. If you walked into your day as a captain and did your business, got on the emails, look at all the department stuff. And again, I was just having this conversation with my son this morning about, the negativity that's kind of still within the fire service, because everyone's got something to bitch and complain about, right? Mm. Management isn't doing this, or they're not fixing this, or we don't have any, supplies are here. All that. Look, we could go on for days and days about all the stuff that we can bitch and complain about, right? But if you're coming to the table, and I'll just put me as an example, if I'm going to be that captain that's going to walk in, look at the emails and go, oh, we got, school demonstration, and we got this thing, and we got to be over here, do prevention, do another. And then that's it, like, on your way. I've not done my job, right? Because I don't know how my crew is set up for the day. How am I supposed to know what went on yesterday? What if there was something really significant in someone's life, whether it be, they lost a family member, grandma, or, the dog, they had to put the dog down yesterday, right? I've been through those. Those are tough, man. Right. I'm not 100% when I come back to work the next day. You know what I mean? So how are you is the bottom line. Is everyone good to go? And if we need to put everything off, absolutely. I'm not ready to have our crew engage in the daily activities until, like, do we need to take a little more time and sit around and chew the fat at the kitchen table? We've gone till noon fixing, stuff. Or maybe it's just someone stepping aside, right? Like everyone else, go work out, do your deal. And, and this is that part I emphasize with peers is that, have you ever been that person that, after morning lineup, someone's kind of going off and talking about something, and you happen to be that last person there sitting there with them, everyone else kind of walked away, then that's probably why you're here, right? Because you were that person that was able to sit there and let them get something off their chest when everyone else walked away, right? And it resonates with them. It's like, yeah, that happens quite often. I go, well, that's probably why you're here, getting the peer training, because you have that empathetic ear. You can listen to people and, and give them the time, because look at where we are. LA is a mess. I mean, it's constantly on a hot cycle, right? Yeah. That hamster wheel never slows down.
Yeah.
There's always something going on. Everyone's always, anyone that's been out driving anywhere knows, right? People are in such a rush all the time. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't slow down, right? So when do we stop and take a breath? And, you know, one of the worst things in the world for me, because when I fly all over and teach at different places, I love going outbound. Leaving LAX is the greatest thing in the world for me. Like fly out, it's like, oh, okay, I'm on a plane. And when I get there, most every other airport, and especially the smaller town stuff where it's like you get off on a, you know, a jet ramp and you walk down onto the runway and then walk into the airport.
Right.
Those little small, smaller airports, and you walk in and you go to the curb and there's like 3 cars. That's it. It's like, oh, and then you have to come back to LA. Like I almost have to prepare myself to arrive back at LAX because you know what you're going to go. The very first thing coming back into LA is high stress. Mm-hmm. Everyone's yelling, screaming, you know.
Yeah, it's depressing.
Traffic. It's like, I hate LAX. It's horrible.
It's pretty terrible.
So,
yeah, you know, I do want to come back to something we were talking about. And it was active listening. You know, it's kind of piggybacking of what we were talking about right now. And that's a skill, without a doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Just actively listening.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I did the peer support group training, that was one of the key points, is just being that. And there's something in just listening and just being there for someone.
Right.
And I practiced this on my stepdaughter. She's 10 years old at home. She knows when I'm not listening to her. And so I practice by just being present with her and just listening to what she has to say with complete curiosity. You know, I love doing that and I know when I'm caught up in my own shit and I'm like not paying attention to her. I'm like, hey, I check myself. I'm like, hey, you're not paying attention. You're worrying about something else. Yeah. You're worrying about what we have to do, because that brings in connection to her. And she knows that. She knows it. And she's so intuitive that right. she can just call me out. She's like, hey, you're not listening to me.
Right.
And that bothers her.
Right.
You know, so I really use her. She's like my little Zen master, you know, she's my teacher in a sense, because she's so innocent and pure. And so she can always call me out as well, you know, and I really find that to be a great attribute to when I can use that for other people,
right.
Because a lot of times we all just want to be heard, you know, at some point. And it's really beautiful when you can do that for someone.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's just, I think that skill level, it grows and grows, you know, and it comes into my practice as a paramedic. You know, it comes into my practice on the job in other ways, you know, on an administrative level. And I think a lot of the conflict and the polarization comes from that as well. But I think there's a severing that's happening right now on a bureaucratic state where all the workers, the blue collar workers with the boots on the ground, as they say, we feel unheard by the administration, by the higher ups. And that is causing a large stir within the union, within firefighters world, you know, nationwide, because we're hurting. There's nothing getting done. And that administrative betrayal really cuts deep.
Yeah.
You know, so I just recommend everyone to realize our unification is one of the key points in medicines for this epidemic of mental health. You know, if they're not going to do it, they're not going to get their hands dirty, we have to do it.
Yeah.
And so peer support group training and being a peer supporter is one of the best things for that. And I really feel like that's one of the threads that's going to start sewing these wounds together, but it takes an army. It really takes a legion.
Absolutely. So there's 2 things with that. And I said before I would get back to it, and we're going to get back to it because you talked about it administrative, and I'm going to kind of hit hard on that a little bit here in a second. But I will tell you, when you talk about the active listening and the importance of that, especially even at home, right? Because my daughter's a 911 dispatcher.
Oh, really?
She works for an agency on the South Bay that covers like 6 different cities, police and fire. There is no slow part of that day.
Mm-hmm.
Always going, like high into, you know. So I knew, and my daughter and I have a really, really close relationship. We kind of feed off each other, and we kind of like know when someone's having the day. I know, right? Because the good thing is our communication is really good. She was texting me about her day, and it wasn't going well. She was having some issues with supervisors and staffing issues, which is across the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell it was a day, right? So I kind of like prepped for her arrival home, right? Like, okay, let's have dinner ready. And normally on any given day, we sit down and we usually have the TV on in the background, right? But it's a distraction, right? We might not have much to say, and we're watching, or we're watching, enjoying a show or something like that while we're eating. This was not that day. This was like no TV, and I set it up that way, like turned the TV off, and dinner was ready. She walked in, and I didn't say anything. It just happens. She needed to unload, and I was ready for it, right? And it was all into the like really active listening. So you have to kind of have an awareness, right, to where people at and meet them there. It's important. To the administrative stuff, and I will tell you, look, I'm sure I could have promoted up, wherever in the department, but I chose to be where I was at. I was comfortable being at that position as a captain because I still felt like, and I've always appreciated being part of that crew, right? I'm still in the house. I wasn't for the last 5 years of my career. I would work overtime, work in the house. It was great because I still got to get my feet wet and be in the station house around the folks. But I kind of got sucked up into the administrative side of it. And I was a thorn. A good buddy of mine, John Scavarda, and I were known as the thorns in peer support because we kept coming at him, right? And that's what I did for most of my career in that administrative role in the peer support. It was always a fight. Now, let me get back to a thing that we have all heard, and I think it'll hit a tone with people. Is that I have heard this my entire career. Our people are our most important asset. I don't even know how I want to say what I want to say about that because, I never felt that, right? We're a number, we're a seat, fill the seat, do all that stuff, next guy up, whatever. I've never, there's only maybe, and I'm not going to completely, shut down the top brass all the way across the board because there's really good people out there that are really engaged, and there is a belief in that, and there is truth to that. But it's a machine, right? The people at the top are always trying to get the next thing, right? The administrative budgets, all these other things. But when it comes down to, what's truly important, right, is your people that go out and do the job every single day. And if they're not right, I don't care what kind of equipment you have out in the bay. It doesn't work without the people. And if your people aren't right, you don't have anything. So, I heard a Phoenix fire chief say it one time, we take better care of our equipment than we do our people. Right?
So true, man. It really
For
is.
God's sakes, if that statement was to be true, we're screwed in LA because have you seen our equipment? And, if they take better care of the equipment than our people, think about how we're taking care of our people, right? I mean, we're in dire straits. Our fleets are aging. The equipment, having help our folks in fleet, mechanics and all that stuff that are always fighting that uphill battle, right, to get equipment out and all that stuff. But anyway, so back to the point of where our people are. We have to do more. And I have fought for that and fought for that and fought for that. And I can't tell you how many times I have been at memorial services, funerals, for those members that we've lost either through suicides or whatever. That, and I got to tell you, I mean, there was we were having rashes of suicides over the years, and I'd heard it at funerals over and over again. Like, well, we're gonna do better, right?
Right.
I never saw that.
Same.
I never saw it. You know what the real truth to any of this is? and this is, I'm sure, going to be hard for those that are in the administrative levels or those that are, is that the only real change, there's two things. You have any idea what those two things are that create real change?
Action could be one of them.
Death and lawsuits. Lose a member,
That's so true.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to fix something, right? Something starts happening. Or they start getting hit in the pocketbook and you hit them with lawsuits. It's the only way that we've expanded our peer support program to the level that it is because of the Sierra incident. We got, I was doing this job by myself in the coordinator role. I'm not discounting all the peers. We have an amazing amount of peers and really, really good people that have done amazing stuff. Jake Wendell is one of our guys that, started our peer support canine program. Absolutely, amazing, wonderful people that have taken good care of our folks in the field. But at the top level, no, I'm sorry. My boss that was my boss before I retired, Chief Gonzalez, was one of the few that got it. They all talk a good talk, but you got to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And until then, I don't want to hear it. And I will not change my view until I see it.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet because it's not being done. The budgets are not there for what we need for behavioral health. We're very fortunate and thank God for our union. That they took it on, which means all of us took it on to pay for a full-time clinician. That has been money well spent that is unrealized. The amount of people that our clinicians have saved, right? And the cost to be able to get people back to work and back in the seats that aren't burning sick time or aren't completing suicide, right? That's a significant piece. There's no way to put a monetary cost on even one person's life. I've seen some spreadsheets of like, what does it cost for a firefighter? What's the cost of a firefighter in a department, right? All the training,
Right.
You put them through that, your, health and wellness, your medical benefits, all these other stuff. Think about the time that we put someone through paramedic school. What's that cost to the department? Well, guess what? You're paying for the paramedic school, you're paying that employee, and you're also paying someone time and a half to fill his spot while he's gone. Right?
Right.
That's paramedic school. How about all the other training, all the other stuff that you've engaged and put towards one member of our department, and then to not take care of them? It doesn't make sense to me. And until I see more of it, and I'm going to continue fighting that, and don't come to me until I see more of the proof that you are putting your money where your mouth is in behavioral health. And I will tell you, when I look at my career as a whole, to go back where I was in the beginning, I am forever grateful to have had the job. It's provided my family, a very comfortable life. It's been amazing, more so on the relationships that were built on the way up and through it all. But there's also a cost in that, right? And what it is to the families and stuff like that. But, don't take it the wrong way. And when I say about, and I'm not trying to be so bitter about the departments, it's just show up, put your money where your mouth is, because I've been there when we used to not do it. And I'm at at my tail end of my career, I saw the benefits of us growing, but that came from fight. Nothing came without a fight. There wasn't anything that came without a fight to do more for our folks in the field. I kind of made that joke, when I would see people, I'd be like, I've been doing this job and look at me, I'm only 38. Look how old I look, actually 60. So it's like, it takes a toll. It wore me out, but it was all because I truly believed in it. Coming from that point of where it was that suck it up, to where it's like, well, maybe we weren't doing this the best that we could, And the last thing I'll say to that is that, taking care of each other, we did a really good job of always taking care of each other. until we got to a point to where we're actually enabling. And when I'm talking about that is that those that came in that, you could tell had been, having a rough night, right? Doing that negative coping mechanism of drinking hard and trying to get through it all. But what did we do? We got you. Don't worry about it. You ride the truck today, which meant you're not going anywhere till you're okay, right? I saw it a lot in my early days of my career, where guys didn't show up on the truck till dinner time, right?
Mm-hmm.
What were we doing? That wasn't the best thing, because basically what we were doing is enabling them to continue with those negative coping skills.
Right.
Right. We have to do better. And we have to kind of call people out when they're just not right. We have to engage, and we can't sit back and just go, oh, no, he'll be fine. We got him,
Yeah. I think a lot of suffering comes from ignorance, and, enabling's pretty interesting because that enables the ignorance in itself, but dying by suicide is pretty interesting, and there's different flavors to it, and just because there has been a gun involved or a hanging involved doesn't mean that other people are dying slowly by drinking themselves to death,
right?
Or with other behaviors by eating themselves to death. You know how many times I watch guys slowly eat themselves to death with their diet at work? It's insane. And paying attention to these things, the cancer that's on the rise. I don't know how many cancer stories I've heard recently. There's so many.
Right.
And, part of this is that self-masochistic behavior of coping. And it shows its face in so many small ways. And those smaller ways are things to pay attention to. And I think with having self-awareness, that's a skill, and that doesn't come easy. That has to be taught. And you are one of the minority to even have that, especially as a leader, but that's one of the key points. And I always tell people, like, in the end, it is your responsibility. You're the only one that in the end has to do the work. And people can help you and show you the tools along the way, but in the end, you're the one that has to show up for yourself because you care about the people you're surrounded by, your family, your friends, and ultimately showing respect and honor to yourself. Really, that's where it shows up as. And that's the cold hard truth in the end. That's one of the answers to it is showing up to yourself and having that the capability to do that. And a lot of times, most of the time, we have to do it by a default because we've gotten injured and we're in that dark hole already. You got to pull yourselves out of it, like we were talking about earlier. And it's like we want to get away from that at some point. To not face life with a catastrophe or some type of bad day or a bad call. It doesn't have to be that way. That's why the preventative maintenance that we do on our apparatus, I love how you mentioned that. That's such a beautiful, awesome thing to say because it's true.
Right.
We do all this preventative maintenance on our rigs and our equipment, but we do it on ourselves. Yeah. I'm seen as like a minority at my station because I do that all the time on my own body and on my own consciousness.
Right.
And I get made fun of for it because of how I eat, because of how I speak. And to the point of where what I feed my mind, I'm very aware of what I do to feed my subconscious. And so, it's only projection. I can see it, because they're threatened by, my actions because they see it in themselves. Like, I don't want to change that, Yeah. And it's really interesting, but we do have to pay close attention to the small things. I think they really do matter. And I got tired of, that's why this podcast started, because we had suicide after suicide.
Right.
And nothing was getting done. Nothing at all was getting done. Yeah. And I was appalled by it, because I just came out of my own dark hole of struggling with suicide ideation. And I realized what I had done to myself, and I had to see it in itself, like it's my own doing, and I had to see, I don't want this for someone else. I want to be able to support someone who's dealing with something like this. In the end, there's I think we've tried to find a lot of solutions, and there's so much to it. It's very complex.
It's so complex. You're absolutely right. I would tell you, man, we've dealt with so many, and not only the ones that I've dealt with within my own department, and I will tell you, there's a couple that are will stick with me the rest of my days because they were members of our department that were having struggles, behavioral health struggles, substance, all that stuff, right? Alcohol, and fought the fight. And I would tell you two of them in particular. One, I was with the guy for probably close to 3 years, on and off, with substance issues, behavioral health struggles. Got him into recovery places. He got out and he started back. And, the journey, and then ultimately ended completing suicide. That was probably one of the biggest struggles of my career, and so painful.
Yeah,
because again, in that mentality of like we're supposed to fix everything,
right?
Like I couldn't, right? And I will tell you, to the depths that we went, beyond, way above and beyond. And the other one that the same thing. It's like, God, I just felt like what didn't we do, right? What was it that we could have done more? And the reality is that we did everything that we possibly could. We had chaplains involved. We had clinicians involved. We sat with the guy. As a matter of fact, the trifecta of that, chaplain, peer, counselor, all sat with this gentleman on a Thursday before it happened. And it happened on a Sunday. And it was in a very, very different place. And then something happened on a Sunday that triggered him, and the ultimate, thing was the suicide. I will tell you, and again, because I've dealt with so many, more so on the back end, the fallout, because that ripple effect is so far and wide on that, right? The station house, the crew, first and foremost, family, but then, our fire family, those members, those crews, I've heard all the things, I didn't see that. I would have never thought that could have been the guy, right, that did that. Or now I'm starting to see some stuff that I wasn't in tune to, but now makes sense to me looking back, right? Going out of county and dealing with all these departments, and here I am coming from an outside agency in and become very integrated in their department and going through their pain of losing a member, right? And hearing all those things that I just mentioned. It's been an interesting ride. I will tell you that I have a deep-seated interest in understanding. I have taken multiple classes on suicide prevention. I actually am connecting with Dee Hirsch, who I have a great deal of respect for in the trainings that they've provided and the work that they do. And here's the bottom line. Behavioral health has always been a stigma, right? Like, oh, you're seeing a shrink or something's wrong with you. You know what I mean? We've changed that, right? We've gotten better. But we used to not talk about that. Now we're talking about it. But one of the things that still lags behind is that straightforward talk about suicide, right?
Sure.
Like, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? And no one wants to talk about that. It's not just something that, you're sitting around the dinner table, let's bring suicide up. It's taboo, right? If you will. Especially when someone's having those thoughts and stuff, it becomes very uneasy. And I will tell you I don't think I'm exaggerating here. I've had, I don't know the numbers, but well over 50 people that I've had people on the line of like, hey, I'm seriously thinking about suicide, or I'm at that point, or, to all those variations and levels. And it never gets easy. Those phone calls are super unnerving, right? Raise the hair on the back of your neck. It's full engagement. This is, like high priority stuff. All right, we got to deal with. All that said, there's so many myths and things that are, that people just don't know, right? And then they have, like, I've heard this, right? We talk about active listening and passive listening. So I've kind of become, an expert in that field of when to turn it on, and I need to be really actively listening. So I was traveling. As a matter of fact, I was going to training at UFLAC for peer support, and I had a chaplain call me, and we got on the subject of something because we just recently had something, and I was trying to keep my, driving LA traffic. I mean, so I was kind of passively listening, if you will, because I wanted to not get in accidents and, get to the UFLAC Center. But it hit me the moment he said, well, it's such a selfless act. And I immediately drew into that and climbed in. And I said, okay, now you got my attention, because listen, we all have comments, unfortunately, our firefighters say things at inappropriate times. After a suicide one time, someone got on and started putting some social media posts and said something to the effect, I remember verbatim, it was like, long-term solution to a short-term problem. You know how incredibly impacted that family to see that? Like, you don't know. You have no idea. You've never walked in his shoes. You don't know his struggles. You don't know what's going on, And like I said, here's a chaplain that was saying that to me. Like, it's a very selfless act, right? I had to kind of like put him on point and go, hang on, stand by. I go, do you have any idea of what was going on with that gentleman? Right? Because when you dive into the depths of that, that's not, like, for someone to actually complete suicide, you know what the number one human instinct is? Survival. And if you've gotten to that point to where you actually beaten the human instinct and you're actually going to take your own life, don't ever judge. Understand that there's something way deeper that you don't have any idea about, right? And so when I talk about that with training, or if it's on a deployment, one of the very first things I put out, and I kind of instruct our peers that are going out, is like, hey, we got to slow down the bad, negative energy. Any comments that are coming out, address those. Get with those folks and say, hey, whoa, hang on. Don't go throwing comments out that you don't know about. You know what I mean? It can be a volatile issue. People can have real strong feelings and stuff, and you have to have a sense about how to address that, right?
Well, we're quick to judge.
Well,
our judgment is
certainly
it's really harsh.
Yeah.
I think our judgment causes a lot of turmoil within our members,
right?
And it's only because we're ultimately judging ourselves individually. And for someone who, so I struggle with suicide ideation, and I know what it feels like. And, I sat with it so much to where I changed my perspective on it with other people. And at some point, I just had this thought one time, like, I thought to myself, how brave for that person. How insurmountably brave for that person to take action. And that thought came through my mind, and I really sat with it for a while, and I thought, wow, that's a pretty interesting perspective change for myself, for someone who struggled with it. And in the end, we have to take into account someone else's suffering and really give them that credit, and for them, they decided it was the end, For me, I think it's metaphysical. A metaphysical standpoint of, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, where it's a cycle that's ending within yourself. something is dying off within you, certainly, because the behaviors that you've set yourself up with, the memories you've failed to integrate, the emotions you've stuffed down, it's all coming back like a tidal wave. And when you're hit up against that tidal wave, it feels like the end. But it's a small death. It's almost like a spiritual death within yourself that has to die off, because there's something that's being reborn within you. There's a rebirth that's about to happen, and it feels like the end. It really does. And I've only speaking from personal experience, because I've went through that. It was a spiritual rebirth within me, because I was transforming. In order for me to evolutionize myself and transform, this other stuff had to shed, man. And it was ugly. It was ugly.
Yeah.
And I knew it. And it was with, the first things that had to go with was the drinking. The second thing that had to go was my behavior around sex. The third thing that had to go was the way I treated people. And after I had to deal with those three things, things started to change, because something was just crawling on my back. These demons I created, that I failed to face, and when you finally face them, the only way out is through. There's no easy way out. You have to face those demons that you created within yourself. And, I've really looked into it, and only because I've seen it in other people who they want to avoid it and they want an easy fix. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as an easy fix, because you don't want to face yourself, and in the end, you can have that support to show you how there's cheat codes along the way, and you can use those to your advantage. But in the end, you have to find some type of some anchor within yourself, because that anchor, the more it seeps deep within yourself, that those storms, when they do come, you're less easily swayed, because you found your truth, and you found your heart, and you found your spirit, and that warrior spirit's now it's been resurrected within you, and I really feel like over time, if you teach someone that, now they have the tools to realize, hey, I can get through this. I always tell people, like, because what really hit me with a peer support group was when they talked about it was a body, mind, spiritual, and mental experience, right?
Yeah.
I think that said that right. Something along the lines of that,
Yeah.
where it's a full multidimensional state of what we have to integrate.
Right.
And I think people had a misperception on what spirituality is. It's like, I always explain to people, like, remember when you were in the academy and you had to find this spirit within you, this warrior spirit, like that's your spirit, that's your spirituality.
Right.
You had to find it and hold it and utilize it. And now 20, 30 years later in your career, what happened to it?
Right.
It's been beaten down, man.
Yeah.
It's been beaten down by calls, by lack of sleep, by poor diet, by your superiors who had no respect for you, and talk down to you. Like, those things hurt, man.
Yeah.
And so now that spirit's, where is it at? It's smothered.
Yeah. Well, it's a job too. I mean, right? I mean, all those things that you said are very, very true, right? But we deal in, death.
Yeah.
And bad things, loss of, whatever it is. I mean, some of the most gruesome things, right? And that's just our job.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So you have to understand where we are, right? Understand the place where we come from, right? Because our job is not to go to birthday parties every day, right? I mean, we sometimes go to those things, right? School functions and different things. And there's all the good stuff, right? But by nature, that's what that 911 hotline is, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we're going to fix that person's bad day, and we see it. I mean, look, I was in the fire service, right? I'm retired now, and living all those years, I mean, there's no way, absolutely no way for someone on the outside of the fire service, and I'm not trying to put us in some kind of like hero category or anything like that. As we know, that's not what we're looking at. We don't perceive ourselves that way. We don't want that praise. That's not why we're doing it. I mean, anyone's getting that job because they want to be a hero is you're coming in it for the wrong reason, for one. But for anyone on the outside to understand and truly appreciate the things that we are put through in our day. I mean, think about those accidents on the freeway in the middle of the night, raining, and you're, and you got, maybe loss of a family, or half the family, and the screaming and all those things that you cannot hear, right? That's just part of our day. You can tell someone that. They can hear it. They can read about it. They, heaven forbid they watch Chicago Fire or some crazy thing like that. Right? Until you do it, right? And that's the beauty of our clinicians that are really, truly culturally competent, is that they understand that they're not. And they can't ever fully appreciate what we live, right? Just like I can't appreciate being a clinician, right? I'm not a clinician. I'm a firefighter. And, but there's a real truth to that it is in the job that creates a lot of those things that we can't unsee. And that's my message to everyone is that, look, you didn't choose to go see this stuff. It's part of your job. Right? So don't ever feel like you can't be okay with not being okay. And where's that anchor point? You speak about it. It's like, where's that, when you get to those depths where you are in struggles beyond your ability to understand how to come out of those. Oh my God, please, make a phone call, right? That phone, of course, it was back in the day when we used to pick up phones, put them, whatever it is, even a cell phone. I'm sorry, sometimes that phone becomes 1,000 pounds. I just can't pick it up. Why? That's that hurdle, right? But if you could, and you just made a phone call, and you talk to a peer that truly is going to get you and understand you because we do the same job. I mean, that's your lifeline.
Yeah.
And how does it not? And again, if you aren't doing a peer support work, just like how I described about being in the fire service, unless you do the job and actually are a peer and engaged and understand what it's like to take those phone calls where someone, look, it's never easy. You know what I mean? Those phone calls, sometimes it absolutely reaches into my soul. When I have a fellow firefighter who is having their worst day and they're broken and they make that phone call and man to man, hearing another man cry is not easy, right? Because that's not what we're supposed to do, right? But man, I'm all in. You made that phone call. I'll stop whatever I'm doing right then and there. As a matter of fact, I only bring this up, the relevancy, because I sat in my driveway at home the other day, and before I went in the house, I got that phone call, to a guy that was he had lost a buddy in a line of duty death. And he was struggling, he missed his friend, he missed his partner, he missed his, and he was broke. He was having that day, and all it took was for me to just actually stop and be able to listen and talk and provide that comfortable place for a guy to be able to say, I'm not okay. And I'm hurting, and this is what's going on. And, in a short amount of time, we kind of moved past that, and there were some things that, he could do, but, man, so much better, right? That's the key. That's the important thing that when I talk about the bureaucratic red tape, talk about the administration, look, I'm sorry, but there isn't, there's a few chiefs I know that are in those levels and do that work, stuff like that, but those that we're a reactive thing, a tool, if you will, in the fire service, and I've seen that used time and time again. It's like, oh, just call Peer Support and they'll handle the stuff. Box checked. Do you really understand the program? Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand what we are alleviating and kind of quelling the situation and calming it down? I mean, I was in that position as a coordinator And I'm going to tell you, it took a long time to get there. I had to, who in the world, and this is the crazy part about, that self-care and stuff that's not good that I didn't do, is like at the end of your career, I've always seen it. The normal path was go find some cush station, pull the e-brake, and cruise, right? Towards, the retirement. Not me. I went into a 40-hour position, put my foot in the gas, and didn't stop. At the end, like, what's wrong with me, But I believed in this stuff, right? Because I've lived it. I've done it. I've seen the good that it's done. It served me well. I've seen it serve others well. And had an incredible amount of people that were doing the same thing, all surrounded by it, right? But all that said, if you aren't doing it and understanding it, it's hard to really understand what that is, right? But man, there is something to it. And if our department could understand how important, going directly back to what that Phoenix fire chief said, right? That our people are most important, well, show me. Because, like I said, in the 5, 6 years, it was almost 7 years, I was in the coordinator position. I actually assisted, kind of personally was alongside over 110 members that we have put into recovery that are doing better. Like, they're actually productive employees out in the field and doing a good job. And it was interesting because it was before the chief that we have now, but the previous chief, I was talking to him about it, and he goes, because it was probably about, I don't know, a couple of years into what I was doing in the coordinator position. And he said, it's really interesting you say that, because I've had a decline in the people that I've seen in my office that are here for termination or serious, disciplinary issues. And I go, well, you're welcome. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, if you guys, it's unrealized gains. If we can put our money where our mouth is and put some money towards behavioral health, you're going to do your department so much better, because you're going to have people that are going to have an outlet, have an ability to anchor into someone, get some help, get some resources, and we get them back. Being a productive employee instead of continually struggling. And what does that lead to? Time off, negative, frustrated, bitter, non-productive employee that's fighting an eternal battle. It's interesting you talk about that captain. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you on the backside, I don't even have to know this guy. I know he's got some stuff that he probably would do well. Just allowing himself to talk to someone. I'm not saying he has to run off and go get mental health and, talk to a counselor and stuff. But my God, if he was just really honest and talk to someone, about what's going on, I think he might have a different perspective, to the whole peer support thing. It's so sad, because we do. I've seen it. I've seen it out on deployments. I've seen departments that eat their own. It's like, man.
We're definitely one of those, that's for sure.
Right.
It's just our culture is designed like that. It's been passed down from generation to generation.
Right. And I don't want to discount the simple fact I said about what I said about training, right?
Yeah.
There's an absolute importance of putting people to task, right? Like, you got to be able to handle this job. This is no joke. Can't say it enough. Train like your life depends on it, right? There's also a stress level. You better be able to handle under pressure.
Right.
Like, you can't just lay down and fold and melt, right? There's no time for that in the moment. You have to be able to react. But how do you take care of yourself on the back end after that is kind of our key point.
Right. No, it's that preventative understanding, maintenance, however you want to perceive it. It's one of the main key points in how you can move forward, but I can't reiterate anymore on peer support, how important it is, because of that, I don't know, that common thread of going to someone who can listen, who understands is huge. No one, and especially within your own department, who understands the culture of that specific department too, is essential. You know, I think our peer support group program's growing. I think prior there it was a useful tool to find a gateway to promotion, you know. But the last training I saw was a big change where there was a lot of younger people who had family members who had committed suicide, and who wanted to be there. Like truly, they wanted to be there because they've had something in their life, that a catalyst that's caused them to understand, you know, someone else's point of view of something, you know. And if, in the end, you know, there's some things we can't avoid. Like, how can you avoid burnout? Like we just talked about, like earlier, like we were getting force hired, you know, on top of already being overworked. And there's nothing you can do about that. Really not. And the only thing you can do is just know where your threshold is and know, hey, time out, you know, explain and be transparent with your family about it, and know when you need a break. And that rest and recovery, like I was mentioning, like rest is a weapon. Most people who are very successful in life know this, that they use rest to their ability. And when they go into that rest state, they're building up that energy to now build a platform off to where they can now launch off that state and now perform with full dignity and full creativity and be able to be successful. We've lost sight on that being a tool and a useful one for that, you know. And it's when you change a perspective on it, you know, you can help someone understand it a bit more, because we're not machines, you know. We are not. Even though we're in this machine life and we're caught up in the rat race, that's part of the sickness. And until you recognize that you're done being on the hamster wheel and you get out of it and you're realizing, hold on a second, I need to time to pause for a second, you know, give me a moment to take a breath. Let me sit in peace. You know, I know.
It's just don't miss an opportunity to take those rest. I mean, focal point, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is an opportunity for me to get some rest.
Yeah.
Take advantage. Don't dismiss it. All right. Don't keep pushing, you know?
Yeah. I know when I worked for the Forest Service, I remember after this one season, we were overworked. Everyone knew it. And the one thing I wanted to do was to eat dinner in front of a television and watch TV. That was the one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to watch a season of Seinfeld and eat dinner. That's what I wanted to do. And and sit on a toilet for once. You know, that was one of my things, you know. But those things we cherish and that are simple, you know, but it really valuable in understanding what works for you, you know. But you really have to bring that awareness. It is so important. So I don't know. I think definitely over time there has to be some guidance, some teaching. You know, I'm very fortunate to have mentors who taught me this stuff. If I didn't, I don't know where I'd be, because I had older people who've been through this game and they've understood injury. They've understood the process. They've understood the logistics. They've understood those dark holes I was in. And they were able to give me that assistance, you know, and then teaching me things. You know, if I didn't have that, where would I be today? I really don't know. I'd be caught up in the same behaviors and the same addictions. That's for sure.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because, you know, and anyone that's got kids will understand and appreciate the fact that, you know, when your kids get to a certain age, they have all the knowledge in the world. Like, I only wish I knew half as much as as my kid did when he was 18 years old, because I'd be a genius, right? But it's funny how life changes, and now, you know, they start coming to you a little bit more with because it's just with maturity, right? You just learn that it's okay to take insight from those that have been through it. I mean, if I was 20 with the knowledge that I have right now, oh my God, could you imagine what you could do, right? With all that wisdom and stuff I've gone through life once, and yet have the youth factor in there, right? To do it all again. It'd be amazing, right? It's an interesting perspective, but, you know, as a matter of fact, you talk about the class, you know, and I want to touch on the fact about, because I am actually going to be one of the instructors for the class here.
Oh, the 14, 15?
Yeah.
Cool.
At UFLAC. So But when it comes to your peer teams, and we've struggled with this, is that why are you doing it? What is your purpose? What's your intent? If you're there for promotions or pay or money or, climbing a ladder, trust me, you're doing it for the wrong reason. You're truly not there. All right. I want to know why you're there, and if that's the case, hey, maybe, you can be effective, but those that are there because they've had stuff, right? And they truly have understood that there's something to being, with the compassionate presence, empathy, and understanding, and aren't looking to, use that as a stepping stone. That's a really important piece of this, because if you're building a peer team and you're, I actually heard it from a department that, we were going to send our peers to a conference, but they wanted to know if they were getting overtime to go. It's like, really? Like, you're going to pay for them to go to a conference, but they weren't going to go because you didn't pay them overtime? Scratch, you're done. You're not going. It's the wrong mentality.
Yeah. I had to use my own time going to this last peer support group conference.
Right.
It was like the budget didn't cut it, to support us,
right.
Which is another thing, but.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like I'm defending the administration.
Well, Scott, we're running out of time here. Yeah. Thank you so much, brother, for coming. I know you've impacted a lot of people with just trailblazing the peer support group stuff, especially in this Southern California area. So how do people reach out to you? You have a website or anything like that?
I'm actually working on that. That's that whole slow roll into retirement. It's not going so well because I'm just really busy, but I am working on getting my website up. I already have my company. So Ross Peer Consulting, and I'm happy to kind of, I can be reached at Scott R. Peer. So SCOTTR Peer, PER. People are like, Scott Peer? No. Scott R. Peer at gmail.com. Or I would just, I'll say it, my phone number is 310-916-5300. Shoot me a text. I may not be able to get to your call right away, but questions, concerns, how I can help, I'm all in and have been for a long time, and I truly mean that.
Thank you, brother. I'll put all this on the description as well of the episode. So thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Grab Lives just to get the algorithm going for someone who needs to hear this episode. And furthermore, all right, everyone, thank you. Take care.
It's time for Grab Lives.